Good afternoon. Welcome to today's virtual breast cancer education series. We're going to give everyone a few more minutes to join, and then we will go ahead and begin the webinar. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Kara Urrutia. I'm an oncology outreach coordinator here with the Samaritan Cancer Resource Center. Before we get started with today's presentation, we're going to go over a few virtual housekeeping items. Today's presentation is being recorded, and the recording will be available online at a later date. We're also using the universal mute button for today's presentation. So we will ask that you please use the chat box up in the top right corner to ask any questions. We will be monitoring the chat box throughout the presentation, and as time allows, at the end of the presentation, we will answer any questions. All right, so I am pleased to introduce our guest speaker for today's presentation. Athena Nofzinger is a registered dietitian and is a board-certified specialist in oncology nutrition. Athena graduated from Oregon State University with a Bachelor's of Science in Nutrition, and she completed her dietetic internship at the University of South Dakota. Athena has worked for Samaritan Health Services for the last 15 years and with the cancer program for the last 3 years. With her focus on anti-inflammatory nutrition and culinary nutrition, she helps her clients meet their wellness goals. In addition to being passionate about food and nutrition, Athena also works on her family farm with her husband. They grow a variety of vegetable seeds for food production. Athena loves being a part of the food production process from farm to table. All right, so without further ado, welcome, Athena.
Thank you, Kara, for that very nice introduction, and I'm really excited to be here today to talk about nutrition. But before I get started, I would just like to disclose that I have no conflicts of interest or relevant financial relationships. Do you want me to start over? Okay, I'm sorry about that. I guess I forgot to unmute myself. So I don't have any conflicts of interest to disclose. And the objectives of my presentation today are that I'm going to be talking about some popular diets related to cancer prevention. I'm going to be discussing juicing, lectins, fasting, plant-based diets, as well as the ketogenic diet. And then I'm going to touch on the relationship between sugar and cancer, and then I will finish off with some information regarding soy, hormones, and weight management. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about celery juice. And then I'm going to touch a little bit on juicing and weight manage, or sorry, just juicing in general. I'm really sorry. Every time I move my slides, I am remuted, so I'm not sure what's going on. I think I need a minute to figure out. Okay, let's see if I can remember to unmute myself every time. Okay, so some health claims around celery juice are that it reduces cholesterol, improves blood sugar, fights cancer, and reduces inflammation. So celery juice has been sold as a juice cleanser. It was made popular over the last year, or probably a couple of years, by the popular brand Goop, and this is a lifestyle brand created by Gwyneth Paltrow. So this is kind of where a little bit of the celery juice promotion came from. So celery juice does contain some phytochemicals. So there are some anti-inflammatory properties of celery juice. But if we think about celery juice and just juicing in general, or other superfoods like blueberries or kale, we don't really know exactly how, just focusing on those, specific nutrients in food, how that affects us. And thinking about how we eat foods in combination with other foods and how they work together, does that give us more of a benefit than, specifically focusing on individual nutrients? So we do know that research continues to show that a variety of foods give us the most nutrition benefit. So that kind of goes back to argue that it's, we may get more benefit from eating combinations of foods together or eating whole foods. And then, just thinking about when you're eating a meal is, are you getting optimal nutrition from just higher doses of nutrients in juicing, or if you eat the whole food, you get other nutrients from eating whole foods. There's more fiber there, and often tends to be more satisfying. What we do know is that eating 5 to 9 servings of fruits and vegetables as whole foods is protective against chronic disease. All right, so thinking about celery juice, if you like celery juice and you want to add it in to your diet as part of a balanced diet for those extra nutrients, that's great. I think some of the concern just comes from if, celery juice or juicing is going to be used as a meal replacement. And then if you're buying more of a commercial celery juice, just making sure you look at the sodium content. Some of the commercial brands out there can have 800 milligrams of sodium per serving. All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about lectins. So concerns about lectins are that they, if you look up lectins online, some of the concerns that people have are that they cause obesity, they cause inflammation, as well as autoimmune diseases. So what are lectins? So lectins are proteins in food that bind with carbohydrates. And this is actually a natural defense mechanism that helps to keep these foods resistant to acidic environments. So this would actually happen when we eat lectins because we, they'll go into our stomach, which is an acidic environment. So lectins are found in most fruits, vegetables, grains, and beans. And they're actually highest in your beans and grains. All right, so do we actually have a reaction to lectin? So reactions are very rare and typically are digestive issues. And really that comes when you're eating raw beans or you consume high amounts of lectins at one meal. And really the concern is that when you eat lectins that they prevent absorption of other nutrients. So something to think about is that, let's say I eat beans for dinner. and they're high in lectins, I'm probably not going to have beans for, the next 3 meals the next day. So even if this reaction is going on, it is preventing some absorption of nutrients. I'm going to eat different foods the next day and get different nutrition there. Beans, grains, fruits, and vegetables have been shown to be protective against several chronic diseases. So really thinking that, the benefits significantly outweigh the absorption concerns or issues that may be going on. And if you cook your beans, grains, or even veggies, this will reduce the lectins. Okay, moving on to fasting. Fasting has been around for centuries, typically for religious reasons, and then became popular in around 2012 when the book The Fast Diet was published. There's really several different regimens for fasting. There's all different fasting diets. So I just have 2 listed here. So the 5-2 is where somebody would restrict to 500 calories per day for 2 days of the week. Another one is the 16-18. So this is basically you fast for 16 hours per day. And this one is kind of doable because you sleep during the fast. So there's not that many hours during the day where you are not eating. There's many other fasting regimens out there. I think one of the things that's really appealing about this for people is that there's really no diet to follow. So it's not like you're counting calories or counting carbohydrates or anything like that. It's really just all around the clock and, hours that you're fasting. Okay, so in regards to weight loss, people do lose weight when they follow a fasting regimen. But what has been found is that the weight loss isn't any faster when you compare a fasting diet to other calorie restricted diets. So if you're doing a low fat diet or a low carbohydrate diet, the weight loss rate is the same when you look at research articles. Something to think about when you're fasting is if you have diabetes, you need to communicate with your healthcare providers because if you're going several hours without eating, but you're taking medications for diabetes, you could end up with issues of low blood sugar. So definitely be communicating with your providers if you decide to follow a fasting regimen. When we look at heart disease, there is an improvement in cholesterol with a fasting diet. And really what's happening here is that you are decreasing your calorie intake, which is resulting in weight loss, which then lowers your cholesterol. Okay, and then fasting in relationship to cancer. So these are the kind of thoughts that are around fasting in regards to cancer is that, if you're spending many hours fasting, that you're starving cancer cells. There is some thought that fasting may make cancer cells more susceptible to treatment. And then is there a reduction in side effects if you're fasting during treatment? So really the overall message I can give you here is that there's nothing concrete right now where we can make a recommendation that, yes, you should fast during treatment. My concern always is if you're, not getting enough nutrients, not getting enough protein, then how is that affecting your cancer treatment? And then if you're, in survivorship or thinking about prevention, if you're fasting several hours of the day, are you getting in all the good nutrients that you need for cancer prevention? Okay, some other things to think about with fasting is oftentimes people are fatigued during the day if they don't have enough, nutrition, they don't have enough fuel, especially people that are trying to exercise consistently, then they tend to have a bit more fatigue. Like I said before, there's a need to communicate with care providers for diabetic management. If fasting is practiced long-term, there's a concern about malnutrition, vitamin and mineral deficiency, and typically, dietitians don't necessarily recommend a fasting diet, but I think if you can work with one to really focus on if you are going to fast, really making sure you're getting high quality, good nutrition during those eating hours, optimizing those eating windows and making sure you're getting all your essential nutrients, your proteins, your essential fatty acids. All right, so now I'm going to move on to plant-based diets. So this is often a diet that people are encouraged to follow for cancer prevention as well as for cancer survivorship. So I want to start with some definitions. All right, so there's kind of, when we hear plant-based, I think a lot of people automatically kind of jump to that this is a vegan diet, but there's actually, several different definitions of a plant-based diet. So the first one is plant strong. So that's an emphasis on consuming plants. And this is probably the one that I recommend the most when I talk about anti-inflammatory nutrition. There's flexitarian, and this is a person who primarily eats a vegetarian diet, but occasionally eats meat or fish. And then vegetarian, and there's two definitions within that. So an ovo-vegetarian consumes eggs, and a lacto-ovo vegetarian consumes dairy and eggs. And then finally, then kind of the most restrictive plant-based diet would be a vegan diet, and someone following a vegan diet doesn't eat any animal products. All right, so I have this chart here I want to show you. And this information is from the American Institute for Cancer Research, and they have this project called the Continuous Update Project, and every 3 or 4 years they publish some information for us to use for people to use personally, or as professionals we can use this to make nutrition recommendations for the community, for our patients and clients. So they kind of put together a bunch of research for us. So the column I kind of want you to look at here is this column of light green boxes, and in the purple here it says non-starchy vegetables. So this whole chart is really around foods and whether they increase cancer risk or decrease cancer risk. So let's look at this non-starchy vegetable column, and it's a light green color. So if I come over to this key, the light green says limited, suggestive, decreases risk. And so that really just means that there's limited evidence, but there's a suggested decreased risk of different types of cancer. So it lines up here with, different mouth cancers, esophageal, lung cancer, breast cancer. So all of those have a light green box. So there's limited evidence, but it is suggested that there's decreased risk with eating non-starchy vegetables. If I go over to these two boxes here under fruit, and so they're lined up with esophageal and lung cancer, so a greater intake of fruit. While the research is limited, there's a suggested decreased risk of those types of cancers. And then over here, if you can see the 11, 13, 15, and 17, those all line up with different antioxidants. So carotenoids, beta carotene, vitamin C, isoflavones. So those are in different fruits and vegetables. So this particular row lines up with lung cancer. So just trying to make the point here of increasing your fruit and vegetable intake, that plant strong intake can decrease cancer risk. Okay, so this is the same chart. I just took a different picture of it so you could see a different part of the chart. The part I want to focus on over here is on the right, and looking at all these columns of yellow boxes. So yellow, if we go back over to the key, says limited, but there's a suggested increased risk. And so these boxes line up with several different types of cancer, and this first one here is red meat, and the other one here is processed meats. So there is a limited evidence, but there's suggested increased risk of different types of cancer with eating red meat and processed meats. So point I want to make here is not necessarily, promoting the vegan diet, but just promoting the plant strong diet, because these really are looking at people who consume red meat and processed meats on a daily basis. So if we're thinking about, eating these things in moderation, if we have, chicken one night and seafood another night and a couple plant-based meals a few other nights, we're getting variety and different nutrients. So just wanting to make that point. And then this other one down here, if we look at this orange box, there's probable increased risk. So a little greater risk with consumption of red meat, specifically for colorectal cancer, and then the red one is for processed meats. So again, these studies are looking at consuming these foods every day. So just again, making that argument for your fruits and vegetables and your plants. So a couple more things about the vegan or vegetarian diet. A vegan diet may reverse heart disease. A vegetarian vegan diet may help to improve certain types of arthritis. And just wanting to say that because you know, that is just another inflammatory condition. So if you're eating more fruits and vegetables, kind of that proof for lowering inflammation in general, but also could be due to the low fat content of these types of diets. And then this statement is from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Vegetarian diets are associated with lower risk of heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, obesity, and some types of cancer. And then finally, 5 to 9 servings of fruits and vegetables per day. And this is from the American Institute for Cancer Research, and that's their recommendation. So again, the overall message here is to eat more plants. All right, some things to consider if you are following a plant-based diet. You know, your animal proteins are definitely more concentrated in protein, so you can get all your protein from your beans and lentils and legumes and soy food sources, but you do have to be mindful of, you know, I need to make sure that I'm getting these foods in at most of my meals so that I get adequate protein intake. And then thinking about, okay, where am I going to get my calcium from? Where am I going to get my iron from? So just taking a little bit of time to research these plant-based proteins and making sure that you're getting your nutrients from those. And then if you are following a vegan diet, most people do need to take a B12 supplement because that is found in your animal products. Couple other things to think about, or this is what I talk with people about when they really are considering following more of a plant-based diet. There can be more food prep, more chopping of fruits and vegetables, maybe a little more grocery shopping, a little more meal planning to make sure that you're getting in proper nutrition. And so I just like to keep in mind that not everybody is a foodie. Not everybody wants to be in the kitchen doing more cooking. So I think there's a lot of areas where people can increase their fruit and vegetable intake, follow that plant strong type of diet, and combine it with other good nutrients from your animal proteins, but still get all that anti-inflammatory benefit. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the ketogenic diet. All right, so what is the ketogenic diet? So I'm going to give you the definition of the clinical ketogenic diet. So this is where 5% of your calories come from carbohydrates, 20% of your calories come from protein, and 75% of your calories come from fat. So really you're not eating, there's no fruit, no grains, no dairy, and no starchy vegetables. So your diet includes meats, non-starchy vegetables, and fats. When we look at, you know, people who are just following a ketogenic diet for weight loss, most people don't follow the actual clinical diet. There's kind of all kinds of versions of the ketogenic diet out there, you know, going from a very low carb diet to a ketogenic diet. People kind of are somewhere in the middle there when they follow this diet. So what happens is our body's main source of fuel is glucose. And so when we follow the ketogenic diet, because we're not eating carbohydrates, our fuel source changes from glucose to ketones. And fat is converted into ketones for energy. And this is part of the reason this is so appealing to people, because who doesn't want fat turns into ketones? And, you know, let's get rid of the fat. You may have heard of people having the keto flu, or if you've done this diet, you may have experienced this. So what happens is when you have that kind of keto flu feeling, it's a drop in blood sugars and weakness and fatigue. And it's your body going through that change in fuel source. So as our body converts from using glucose, it uses up all your glycogen stores. So glycogen is basically stored glucose. And then after you use up all your glycogen, then it moves over to using fats for fuel. And so all of this is going on when you're having the keto flu, which is why people tend not to feel good. I think it's usually like the first 5 to 7 days of the keto diet. Since most of your calories and nutrition are coming from fat, it is a very filling diet. So people feel very full. They may not snack as much as they normally do. And limiting your carbohydrate intake tends to lower your overall calorie intake. So between lowering your calories and feeling very full throughout the day, people just tend to eat less when they're following a ketogenic diet. And I think the other reason this is appealing to people is that, again, this is not one that requires calorie counting. There's not really portion sizes. It's really just focusing on getting the really high fats and the protein. Okay, so benefits of a ketogenic diet. So on a ketogenic diet, you do lose weight, and you know that is very appealing. And sometimes the weight loss is very quick. In the short term, you have improved cholesterol because you've lost weight. You do have better blood sugar control, and you're not taking in any simple sugars. And this diet is recommended for children with epilepsy. Is it an anti-cancer diet? So I really think the information out there is very conflicting right now. You know, if they're able to show that it's protective against cancer, is it specifically the foods that we're eating or that you're getting the nutrients from fats, or is that, you know, you've lost weight and is that giving you the protective benefit, or now your blood sugars are more controlled because you're not eating carbohydrates? Is that where the protective benefit is coming from? And then the other thing we know is that high fat diets have shown to increase risk of several types of cancer. And then diets high in meat consumption, we kind of looked at that chart a few slides ago, increased risk of several different types of cancer. So, you know, I don't think there's good enough information out there right now to say that, yes, the ketogenic diet is going to give you that anti-cancer benefit or, you know, protection from cancer. And then the other thought is, you know, if cancer cells are smart and if they're not getting carbohydrates or glucose for fuel, then they're going to figure out another fuel source. So they're going to start using ketones or proteins for fuel if they can't get that glucose. All right, and then I think keto is going to be around for a while. I think there's a lot of research going on in regards to diabetes management, in regards to cancer prevention, or, you know, used as a diet during cancer treatment. So I think that the ketogenic diet will be around for a while. But like I said before, at this point, there's not enough evidence to make any recommendations to say that this is a good diet to follow for cancer prevention. Okay, so some concerns regarding the ketogenic diet. So the first one is low fiber. So people end up pretty constipated because they're not eating any grains, they're not eating any fruits. And we do know that following a high fiber diet helps to control blood sugars, helps to improve cholesterol, and helps to prevent certain types of cancer. And then also thinking about, there's different, you may have heard this word before, a dirty keto diet. So really that comes back to food choices on a ketogenic diet. So, you know, what foods are you choosing to eat while you follow this? Like, a lot of people they really enjoy it because you can finally eat all the bacon and cheese and meat you want and still lose weight. Or is somebody trying to do, okay, I'm going to try to get leaner proteins in and choose more olive oil as my fats and try to get some non-starchy veggies in. So there's kind of some different ways to do it, but you still get the same weight loss benefit. And then thinking about, you know, we've heard for a long time, like, it is really beneficial to have, you know, good gut bacteria. And if you're not eating any fermenting grains, you're not eating any dairy products that have probiotics in them, you're not getting the fruits and vegetables that promote a healthy gut flora, what happens long term with that? Just like the fasting, once you start a ketogenic diet, you really need to talk with your healthcare providers if you're taking diabetic medications to prevent any low blood sugars. I typically recommend, you know, I want to work with somebody about, let's make sure you're getting your vitamins and minerals. You can get some vitamin and mineral deficiencies because you're not eating very many fruit, or you're eating no fruits and not very many vegetables. You're at increased risk of kidney stones. And then what's the long-term effect on heart health and inflammation over time as you are following that high fat of a diet and consuming a diet primarily in meat? And then just like other low carb diets, what happens when you go off of the diet? Typically people gain that weight back plus a few more pounds, and you kind of get stuck in that low carb diet trap of every time you go on a new diet, by the end of it, you're a bit heavier than you were before. And most people do not stay on any type of diet very long term, especially when it's very restrictive like the ketogenic diet is. So just kind of thinking about, is this a sustainable diet that you can continue? So just like fasting, most dietitians don't recommend that you follow a ketogenic diet, but I recommend that you find one that will work with you, that will help you with the constipation, help with the vitamin and mineral recommendations, and with kidney stone prevention. All right, so then a big question I get asked a lot is, what is the best diet to follow? And I don't think there's one particular diet for every person. There's lots of diets out there. These ones here on the left, the Mediterranean, the DASH diet, low fat diets, low calorie diets, if any of these kind of promote the same thing: more fruits and vegetables, lower fat, more whole grains. So you get kind of the same weight loss results, get the same anti-inflammatory benefits. So they all kind of follow the same regimen. And same with the Whole30, South Beach, Paleo. The keto and fasting are definitely more restrictive, and you're missing out on a lot of the grains, fruits and vegetables and those things. But I think it's just, what is one that you could start today that you could stick with? Do you enjoy it? Does it help you to stay accountable? Is it realistic for you? Thinking about, like food prep and cooking or counting calories, or what is realistic for you personally, and is it achievable? All right, so moving on from diets, now I'm going to talk some about the relationship between sugar and cancer, because there is still concerns there. So I would like to start with just explaining what are carbohydrates, and then talk about our insulin response to eating carbohydrates, and then the concern of cancer cells and sugar. So carbohydrates are a naturally occurring part of plants. They provide energy for us, for our muscles, for our brains to function. And all carbohydrates that we eat, whether we eat whole grains, whether we eat fruits, whether we eat starchy vegetables like potatoes, all of those foods get digested and broke down into sugars for us to use for energy. So other than providing us energy, carbohydrates, then after they're broken down into sugars, they're stored for us for energy for later. So they're stored as glycogen and then into fat storage. Some sugars require insulin, which is a hormone, in order to enter the cell. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So there's 3 main sugars that we eat. So glucose, which is in fruits, sugars, grains, vegetables, galactose, which is the sugar in dairy, and then fructose. And this is also in fruits, sugars, grains, vegetables, and then you've heard that HFCS is high fructose corn syrup. Okay, so this picture is kind of a basic diagram of how our food turns into energy. So I'm going to eat this strawberry here. It goes into this first blue circle, which is my stomach basically, and gets digested. And then it's going to go into 2 different pathways. So this first one, this smaller circle here it's a cell basically. And so the glucose is going to come out of my stomach. There's a lot more processes with that, but it's going to end up getting to the cell. In order for it to get into the cell, I have this kind of keyhole here, and I need a key to unlock it. Basically, we consider insulin the key to unlock the cell. So my pancreas is going to make insulin, or make all these keys, and the keys are going to go out there, unlock the cell, let the glucose in, and then the cell is going to turn it into energy for me to use. If I have excess glucose, then it's going to be stored by my liver into glycogen so that I have energy to use when I'm not eating or between meals. And then other excess glucose will eventually be stored as triglycerides. So that's just kind of the basics of how we get energy from the carbohydrates that we eat. Okay, so then thinking about cancer cells and sugar. So this picture here is a cell, and then there's more insulin receptors here on the cancer cell. So there's more opportunity for glucose to get into the cancer cells. So that's kind of where that concern of, okay, I don't want to eat sugar because more glucose gets into the cells and makes them grow. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. So really, the main concern that we have here is the insulin. So insulin is a natural substance made by our body, and insulin can tell cells to grow. So in simple terms, this is where this insulin-like growth factor term comes from. If you've heard of that, it's that concern of that the more insulin we have, it's telling things to grow. All right, so instead of thinking about, every time I eat carbohydrates, I'm feeding, I'm feeding these cancer cells, it's really more about what kind of carbohydrates are we eating and how much. So when I say quick carbs, I mean simple, things that are very simple sugars that don't have a lot of fiber in them, that don't necessarily have protein in them, or we're eating large volumes of those things. And when we do that, that makes our blood sugars go higher, and then our body has to make more insulin in order to deal with that. And so like I said, the more insulin we have, that stimulates, it's a growth hormone, so it stimulates growth, increases inflammatory hormones, and then suppresses our immune system. And so we don't want our immune system suppressed because we want it to be doing its job to fight cancer. Okay, so then thinking about this from a different angle, when we eat excess sugar, so the key word here being excess sugar, this leads to obesity. Obesity causes insulin resistance at our muscle cells. And this insulin resistance leads to an excess of insulin. And then when we have more circulating insulin, this tells our body to store more fat, which then leads to more obesity and more insulin resistance. So if you like pictures, I've got two more pictures here for you. So this one here on the left is kind of the normal process of how things work. So I eat something that's broken down into sugar. This blue box is the insulin. It's going to unlock the cell, let the sugar in, and then turn it into energy for me to use. If I have insulin resistance, I eat sugar, and my body makes insulin because it's going to try to unlock these cells, but it doesn't fit anymore. The blue box doesn't fit in the light blue box anymore. So the sugar is not let into the cell. So I have more sugar, and now I have more insulin, which is a growth hormone, and I'm still not getting energy and fuel from the foods that I'm eating. Okay, so thinking about this, it's kind of sounding like I'm saying, yes, the low carb diets or the ketogenic diet would be really beneficial. But the point I want to make again is this is the excess sugar, and just, the more sugar we eat over time, that causing the insulin resistance. That is what is concerning, and our body's creating more insulin. So then making kind of an argument for, fruits and grains and vegetables being protective and beneficial. So if we look at this chart again that I showed you earlier, over here on the left, there's a couple of turquoise boxes, and those are specifically under whole grains and foods containing fiber. And this one is actually, if we look at that key again, there's a probable decreased risk of colorectal cancer when we eat whole grains and fiber. If we look at your fruit intake, greater fruit intake, there's these light green boxes again, so lower risk of lung and esophageal cancer. Moving over to this column that says foods containing carotenoids. So moving down to these number 12s, these light green boxes, so there's suggestive decreased risk of breast cancer, eating foods that contain carotenoids. So those all are going to be in your fruits, some of your starchy vegetables, your grains, So just kind of making that argument that those foods do have some protective benefit. And then dairy, finally finishing up with dairy here. So dairy products, if we bump down to these light blue boxes, so dairy products and foods high in calcium, there's limited evidence, but there's suggested decreased risk of breast cancer. All right, so then thinking about, what our typical pantries look like and foods that we consume, this could be a typical pantry. And if you're looking at these foods, there's snack foods in here and some sweet foods, but there's also some dinner things that a lot of us may eat. And so, what's concerning about these is there's the added sugar, which leads to that excess sugar. There's not a lot of protein in these foods. There's not very much fiber. So we're not going to get the same benefit as from that I showed on that chart by eating these particular foods that have carbohydrates. If we look at these pictures, there's kind of a big difference here between these foods. So, there's a big difference between eating a donut for breakfast versus eating bran cereal. And I have some raisins in there with, the milk that has some calcium, and all of those things with the fiber and some extra fruit, and the calcium are going to possibly have some protection. And then, just looking at having a croissant or a whole wheat pita, there's some difference there in your grain choices. And then taking it one step further, these are kind of, your whole grains. So we've got like quinoa and couscous and rice and corn. And, when we eat these things, there's not any added sugar until we add it. There's more protein in them. There's more fiber. And typically we have these things with another protein source. So it's not going to raise your blood sugars as some of those other foods would. So you're going to get a lot of more of that protein and fiber, which is going to help with that insulin response and decrease inflammation. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to soy. So there is still some concern about soy, and does that increase breast cancer risk? So soy actually does not contain estrogen. It contains phytoestrogens. And so the reason that this was a concern is because early studies showed that rodents consuming soy had an increased risk of estrogen receptor positive breast cancer. Later, it was found that rats and humans metabolize soy phytoestrogens differently, and the way that soy binds to estrogen may actually be protective. Human studies have shown no increased risk in cancer risk, and soy consumption was actually associated with a decreased recurrence risk. And is it specifically the soy or other things to consider? Typically, when people have a lot of soy in their diet, they may follow a lower fat diet, they have a higher fiber diet, they're eating more whole foods, eating less red meat. There's a lot of things to consider there. But at this point, there is no increased risk with consuming soy products. There is a nutrient in soy called genistein, and it is an isoflavone, and that is an antioxidant. And this genistein may inhibit growth of mammary and prostate cancer. It also inhibits blood vessel growth to tumors. And it promotes natural healthy cell death. I know cell death doesn't sound like a good thing, but we actually want our cells to go through their cell cycle and then die, and want our body to make new healthy cells. So soy actually promotes that process. So soy foods, or a serving of soy foods, is 1 cup of soy milk or 4 ounces of tofu, half a cup of edamame. 3 servings per day is considered safe to consume. And we recommend consumption as whole soy foods. And then there's, then people will ask me, well, soy is in all of the foods that we eat, and meaning more like it's in the processed foods that we eat. And that is really the soy protein isolate. And that doesn't necessarily have the same effect as eating the soy food as a whole food. Using soy protein powder in moderation as part of a diet is completely safe. The soy protein isolate is found in the processed foods. And really, does the soy protein powder have that same protective effect? Is it as high as in the phytoestrogens and in that genistein? And that's where it's really about the whole soy food where you get the best protection. And then just wanted to share that these associations provide these same recommendations about soy. So the American Cancer Society, AICR, and World Cancer Research Fund International, they all have the same recommendations about soy. Okay, and then finally, just talking a little bit about hormones and weight management. So I'm going to list some different hormones here, but really the take-home message here is weight management, and kind of be thinking about a little too about what I was sharing about the insulin and how that relates to weight management. So we have adipose tissue, and adipose tissue is basically fat tissue. And this is what causes insulin resistance. And I kind of showed you those diagrams of that. And it also increases inflammation. So there's a hormone called leptin, and this is produced by our adipose tissue, our fat tissue. So the more adipose tissue we have, the more leptin our body makes. And this leptin actually increases uncontrolled cell growth and inhibits that healthy cell death I was talking about. So it kind of keeps your healthy cells from dying. It doesn't let the cells go through that healthy cell cycle to make new healthy cells. And promotes angiogenesis, which is just a fancy word for saying it promotes that blood vessel growth to tumors. There's another hormone called adiponectin. And this is actually a good hormone. So this hormone decreases insulin resistance and inflammation, and it promotes that healthy cell death. And we have less of this hormone when we are more obese. Also, in regards to concerns about estrogen, adipose tissue is the primary site of estrogen production. So that's a lot of information, but really the point I want to make is, because I get asked a lot about, what foods do I need to eat to change, the hormone levels in my body, and it really comes back to the weight management issue. So if we're working on weight management, we're reducing that adipose tissue, that fat tissue, we're improving our blood sugars, which reduces inflammation. If we have lower blood sugars, we're not having as much of that insulin in our body. And we have improved immune function when we have less adipose tissue. So in the end, it comes back to that balanced diet, healthy lifestyle to promote weight management, instead of focusing on the superfoods or specific food types or specific diets. I think, doing an overall healthy lifestyle and then the superfoods on top of that is great, but kind of going back to the basics of the balanced diet and healthy lifestyle. This slide is from that same, where I got those charts from, that continuous update project, and they kind of have the same recommendations to be a healthy weight, work on activity, whole grains, fruits and vegetables, less processed meats, less red meats, limit sugar consumption, limiting alcohol, just kind of the same overall healthy lifestyle recommendation. Okay, and then I wanted to offer some nutrition resources, because I know there's a lot of information out there online, so I just wanted to offer you a couple of resources if you want more information. So the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, Oncology Dietetics Practice Group, the American Institute for Cancer Research, American Cancer Society, and that continuous update project. And I do have a website, it's down here on the right, if you want to visit that website and learn more about how they come up with their nutrition recommendations, and just learn more about the recommendations in general. So that is the end of my slides. I apologize for it being rough getting started and my microphone issues, but I appreciate you sticking with me, and I am going to turn this back over to Kara.
All right, thank you, Athena, for your presentation today. It was so informative. As a reminder for everybody, we do have 2 remaining sessions in our series. If you haven't already, there's still time to register. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get into the Q&A portion of today's webinar. It looks like we've already received a few questions in the chat box. If anyone has any other questions, I would advise you to submit them now. So Athena, it looks like the first question we received is, would a person with NA fatty liver avoid the keto?
Yes, I would recommend they avoid the ketogenic diet just because it is so high in fat that, yeah, that isn't going to give them the benefit they want with that condition.
All right, thank you. And then the next question was regarding dairy from cow products. Could you give us some other examples of sources that offer the same benefits as dairy?
Oh, yes. Yeah, so any of your, plant-based and nut milks are just fine because a lot of those are, they're fortified with calcium and iron. There's other sources you can get calcium in your diet. A lot of your some of your soy products are fortified with calcium, and greens have some calcium in them, so you can get, some of those nutrients from your plant-based foods. Yeah, and then consume it like in the probiotics, if you're wanting more probiotics, focusing on a variety of fruits and vegetables and grains will still give you a variety of probiotics in your diet if you're not wanting to consume dairy products.
All right, and would the same be true for goat or sheep products?
Yeah, those can be included. So I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question, but those are going to have, different nutrients in them. So, if you're consuming goat milk or sheep milk, it is still going to have some iron and calcium in those products as well.
Great. All right. It looks like we have one remaining question. This question says, how does one measure his or her insulin resistance?
Ooh. So that is going to be something that you'll want to talk with your doctor about, and they can refer you to our diabetes clinics, and they're really good at helping people to manage some of that. And if there's certain labs they can draw to help people measure that, they are a great resource for that information.
Great. Thank you so much. It looks like we're going to give about another minute or so for any final questions, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap up the webinar. Okay, it looks like we haven't received any additional questions. So it looks like that will sum up the Q&A portion. Oh, wait, we just got another question. Okay, just in the nick of time. All right, this one says, can you be insulin resistant without being diabetic or pre-diabetic? Oh, that's a great question.
I don't have a great answer to that. Yeah, I'm going to have to ask one of my diabetes educators to answer that concretely.
All right, we'll provide more information in a follow-up email about that question then. So that will conclude our Q&A session for today. If anyone does have any, remaining questions, please feel free to reach out to us at Cancer Resource Center at samhealth.org, and we will be happy to answer any questions or ask Athena about any questions. We will be emailing out a link to an evaluation soon. Please take a moment to complete this evaluation. This evaluation really helps us to provide some valuable feedback for future events. And once again, I want to give a huge thank you to Athena and everyone else that was able to attend today. We hope to see you again at our upcoming webinars, and have a great rest of your afternoon.